This week's lesson is a two-color painting, and these are examples for this. This painting was done with magenta and Payne's gray. This one was done with ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And this one was done with yellow ochre and raw sienna. Hi, welcome to the second lesson of our winter acrylics class. Today we're doing a two-color painting, and I have some examples up on the board which I have put on the video also. And these are all two-color, and you would never think that when you looked at them. You wouldn't think that that's just two colors, but that's all I used on those. And what we're going to start off with, though, before you get to the painting, is I've got a grid that I'm going to hand out to everybody, and I want you to do some color mixing on this. And I want you to really take your time doing this, because you can use two colors plus white. And you should try on this grid to get every different value of those combinations of colors and a different color for every square. And so take your time on it, because what I'm going to do, if you don't worry about not having enough time to finish your painting, because we will continue this painting on to next week, because the next week's lesson is a little bit shorter and needs a lot of drying time. So you could be working on this painting at the same time that you start the next project. Okay? So in this grid, what you want to do, the colors I picked. I told you to bring 4 colors. You could actually use another combination, but this is the criteria on those colors. You need to have 1 warm color and 1 cool color. And so ultramarine blue is a cool color, and burnt sienna is a warm color. So those go together. And they're also, the ultramarine blue is a little darker than the burnt sienna. So you want one that's a little darker. So you want that combination. You want a darker and a lighter color, and a warm color and a cool color. But those would be just within 2 colors. So I've picked some that I know are magenta is warm, and what I used with magenta was Payne's gray, which is cool. And then I used, that's on the far left side. Then on the middle one, I used ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. On the one on the far right, I used yellow ochre, which is warm, and raw sienna, which is cool. Okay, so you could pick any of those combinations, or another one that you come up with, as long as you get the warm, cool, light, dark combination in there. So what you're going to be doing is, this is a really good exercise in mixing, because you're going to mix your colors, and some, you will have maybe one that is pure of the color, whatever color you pick, but then you go back and mix some of the other color with it, and you get a completely different color. And you can mix some white with it and get a different value of that color. So I just have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 25 squares here. You could do a lot more than 25 squares, each with a different color. Okay? So just take your time on it, do the mixing, and do think about the different values in it. So because you want dark values and light values. And like I said, take your time with this. Okay, we're about ready to, I'm just going to give you, if you're not done with this part, go ahead and continue on and take your time. Like I said, there's no rush, but I do see that some people are kind of done, so I wanted to talk about the next step. You have a picture, a black and white picture I asked you to bring, with a good range of values in it. And if you have a picture that can be written on, you can use this method. But this is like a traditional method of gridding a picture. It's how artists have, since the Renaissance, done things to copy a picture or to make a picture bigger. And what it is you divide the picture up into 16 squares by just doing 4 lines across the up and down, halfway, 3/4, 1/4. Draw those lines down, and the same way the other way, halfway, 1/4, 3/4. And so you end up with 16 squares. What this allows you to do is get the proportions right, you know, when you're making a change. So after you've done that on the picture, then you take your paper that you're going to be working on and do the same thing. Now obviously this is a bigger paper, so it's going to be bigger squares. So, but that doesn't matter, you still have 16 squares. And then what it allows you to do is to take each of the little squares, and you can see where lines, how close a line is to the edge. Like I can see that in the middle of this square, this window comes in, so I know that in the middle of the square on the big one, I have to go to the middle of that square to make that line. And this line is about 1/4 of the way down, so you would do that. So you can measure in each of these little squares. It's easier than trying to draw the whole thing freehand. Okay, if you can understand that. And so once you get that all done, just with your pencil, do a pencil drawing on your paper. And somebody asked me if you need to gesso this paper, and I will tell you that it really is up to you. This is watercolor paper, and so when you don't gesso the watercolor paper, the acrylics act more like watercolor, okay, because they soak into the paper a little bit. And I was looking at each of these 3 that I did. I didn't gesso any of these. These are not gessoed. So they could be watercolor. You wouldn't really know the difference between watercolor and acrylic. If you wanted to act more like regular acrylic done on canvas or oil painting, you would gesso the bottom of this first. And that makes the paint stay on the surface, and it doesn't soak into the paper, and you could do it's a little bit easier to blend, although you can blend with it ungessoed also. But it kind of keeps all the paint on the surface. So you can decide which way you want to go on that. Either way can look good. So that's what you do, and then you start working with your paints and using your grid pattern to come up with different varieties of value in the colors. You know, you can even start with the darkest values and start from there. That might be easy. And then work toward the lighter values and just go around the paint and do that, and just take your time with it. Any questions first?
Can I borrow your ruler?
Oh yeah, you definitely can. I've got a couple of rulers here.
And then you don't actually sketch the picture from here to here. You just make the grids, or do you suggest sketching the picture?
Sketching it, yeah.
Okay.
You use the grid to do the sketch.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. The grid is just a tool. And when you do the grid, do it very lightly.
Okay.
You don't want that to show up that much. And even when you're doing the sketch, it should be fairly light. Although you'll see lines, pencil lines in my drawings, and that's an okay thing. You know, I think it's okay. So, okay. Okay, so next week, we're going to be doing a prep for the next 2 weeks' projects, which are, like I said, they're going to be really different. Some of you may love them, some of you may not, but I mean, that's the way it goes. Sometimes you like what I do, sometimes you don't. But anyway, what we need for that is liquid acrylics, and I mix my own liquid acrylics. I don't go and buy. They sell liquid acrylics, but I don't think it's worth it. I think if you buy hard body acrylics, that's fine. But there are times when liquid acrylics really work well. And so what I do is make my own. And you need a bottle like this. It could be a little bit smaller, but it needs to have a top on it, because these liquid acrylics will last for years if they have a lid on them, you know. So you can mix them up, and I keep them in my cupboard. I've literally had them for probably 5 years.
And how many of those bottles did you say 2?
3.
So,
A yellow, one for yellow, one for red, it can be a magenta or a pyro red, and one for a blue, this happens to be Payne's gray, but a blue, could be ultramarine, could be phthalo blue, whatever blues you have. But basically, the primary color is red, yellow, blue. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna bring some distilled water, because when you mix up liquid acrylics, you have to use distilled water. If you don't, it smells like rotten eggs after a while.
Yay.
Because, and it's not the problem with the paint, it's the problem with the things in the water that you add to it. And just regular tap water will make that happen. Distilled water doesn't. So I'm gonna bring that. I'll bring some little cups to mix them in. If you just bring the bottles and your regular hard-bodied acrylics, and you're gonna need, you know, it shouldn't be a tiny little tube, it needs to be a good-sized tube. And we'll mix it together at the beginning of the class.
What do you consider a tiny little tube? Is this a tiny little tube?
No, that's fine, that's good, that's not tiny. That, tiny little tubes are those, sometimes people get like little ones about this
Oh.
big,
Oh.
but it goes away too fast.
And sometimes you can get those bottles at the dollar store.
Yeah, they sell them at the dollar store.
Yep.
They're kind of called condiment bottles.
Right.
Oh, like ketchup and mustard
Yeah,
bottles?
yeah, pretty much. And, but just make sure you have the lid on it. This one's lost its lid. I lose the lids all the time, but it's better not to. But in fact, some of them have lids attached to them, which would be really better. If I could have found those, I would have loved to have that, because I don't want to lose the lid all the time.
So last year I went in the cosmetics section, like the travel section, where you put your own liquid shampoos and stuff. And because, you know, if you don't want to mix up a huge
Sometimes they're really small, like is this?
like this, and you
Right.
can get a whole
Right,
like
bag of them.
a little plastic case that you put them in, and it's nice for traveling back and forth to here. Because
Okay.
sorry, that was
Okay,
just
no,
my
that's
thought.
good, that's good.
an
Wherever you
option.
can find these, I've seen them at Walmart, I've seen them, they're at various different
Do
places.
they have to have like the pointy lid on them, or
They have to have a lid on them,
just want the pointy?
But the point, so we can squirt?
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's right, yeah, you need to be able to squirt it. I was thinking this lid, but no, this part. Now, what we're gonna be doing next week is taking a half sheet of watercolor paper, and you're going to be painting on both sides of it. We're gonna use a lot of things like, the masking fluid is really good. Or Frisket, sometimes it's called Frisket.
Frisket, like
And you need a brush, an old brush to use in that, because it completely destroys the brushes. So if you have an old brush that you can use, small old brush, that would be good. And then 91% alcohol. I'll have some salt. Everybody doesn't need to bring salt, I've got salt. And I'm trying to think what else. If you have a scraper of some kind, that would be really good. We're gonna try to kind of texturize the paper in various different ways. I'm trying to think what else could be used on that. Anything to scrape onto it or to change the paint. But we're gonna be painting on one side, let it dry, and then turn it over and paint on the other side. So it's both sides of the paint. And this is gonna be a prep for the project that we're doing after this, which is an indigenous pouch. And maybe some of you have done that before. And, but that won't be till the week after, because it has to dry. The other thing that you could use on this watercolor paper is some gel medium. Yeah, gel medium makes it look like leather, okay? It kind of gives it a leathery feel. And so, but that has to be put on after the paint has dried. So that's why there's a lot of drying time in that, and that's why I kind of just set aside one whole session to do that. But while it's drying, you could be working on this painting also. So that would be kind of a good combination. The indigenous pouch is gonna come the next week, and I'll talk more about that next week. And then the week after that, we're doing a woven piece. So these are, these are things that acrylic artists do. I can show you the pictures of the artists that have done these things. But they're not traditional painting on flat surfaces. It's a little bit different take on it. but it's very interesting. And that the indigenous pouch is an interesting one because I think at Nevada Fine Arts they're having a show where you use thrown away stuff, you know, making paintings out of things that would be thrown away.
Yeah.
Well, the indigenous pouch, I'm gonna have you bring things like old jewelry, yarn, could be pieces of leathers, those leather laces that they use for boots and stuff, that would be really good. So you could use a lot of leftover things in this, and you might have a piece that would be appropriate for that show that's coming up in Nevada Fine Arts, if it looks like it's got enough throwaway stuff. Sticks would be good. Anyway, just a lot of extra things in there. We're gonna have fun. It's, like I said, some people really love it, some people don't, because it's just not traditional painting, but it's a little different take on what you can do with acrylics, and there's just so many things you can do. So, any questions about that?
So alcohol, masking,
Fluid,
bottles.
uh-huh,
Will you put all that in your email?
I will,
Then
I'll put it in the email. I always
So
would.
you have the
And I
two-
might even think of some more things to put in there.
Yeah, you have the two colors, the yellow ochre and the pyrrole red. Is that what we're making the liquid?
You can use any kind of red, a magenta, this happens to be a magenta,
Okay.
but there's pyrrole red you could use too.
But is the yellow ochre and the pyrrole red, is that what you have on the, I have your list.
You're right, right.
Is that
right.
what you have on the list for that, or should we
Right.
bring something
No,
additional?
that's it, yeah. I
Okay.
put those down, but it's,
And then a blue.
and a blue.
Okay.
Yeah, the more important part is that you have the 3 different colors, red, yellow, blue, of some sort.
Okay.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be the one that I put
Okay,
in there.
perfect.
Okay, okay, good. More examples from last week's project.
Look at that. Is that,
just keep
Holly, did you bring yours back?
Yeah.
Yeah, now that you see her, you're like, I'm going